Are we recording? Are we
I
starting?
think so. I see a little red dot.
Okay. Hi. Good evening, everyone. I'm Grace,
I'm Lisa.
My name's Diego.
and we're going to be presenting on the Huelga workshop, Finding Your Voice, that was presented by speaker Jessica Ayala at the USHLI conference 2020. Oh, Lisa, can you skip the next slide? All right. So what is Huelga and who is Jessica Ayala? So what is Huelga? So Huelga basically means strike. And speaker Jessica Ayala, who is an artist, activist, and Charlotte Street Foundation founder, she basically emphasized that Huelga strikes and having this confidence and pride in our culture was a way to start this decolonizing process that we as minorities kind of built up with the stigmas that the society and the culture has kind of bashed against us. So my fellow speakers, anything else to add?
Yes. She also did mention very briefly that Huelga doesn't mean just strength. It also means to resist, to build upon. Because as she does mention in her presentation, throughout this process of colonization, I guess, in our education systems, it's also important for us to realize as people of color, as people with diverse different backgrounds and cultures, is that it's important for us to resist these types of changes that are being imposed on us that can affect our identity. It's also important to kind of fight back against the system and establish your culture within yourself and within those around you.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I would say that she heavily emphasized what the meaning of colonization is, and that was basically what she wanted to have the students like resonate with. But she also mentioned, transitioning over to the next slide, the cycle of oppression. And basically what she was talking about is how we have to understand that it does exist, and we have to resist it by not letting it go through a cycle of being born into it, allowing it to go through our family, media, schools, governments, and then rationalizing it behind saying that makes sense, you know, like, and that's how you end up going in a full circle with generation after generation, just feeling like this oppression exists, but they don't know what methods of which they can get out of it. So breaking the cycle really was what she was trying to lead us into with her presentation.
Yeah, I even remember in the presentation that I went to, she had even brought up the oppression that we kind of put on other people in our community, in the Latino community. So I remember an example. She was like, "Oh, not being like Latino enough," and she gave a scenario of like a student in high school, of, like just not being there with their identity, and the bombardment. Oh my God, the bombardment of oppression that we kind of face because of like our skin color, or because of the fact that we don't fit these stereotypical roles. But that's just the whole idea that she had in mind, was like to break those stigmas and to break those mindsets. So Diego, anything to add?
She also did mention something that a lot of us, or at least people here at the UIS campus, like the idea of ni de aquí ni de allá, not from here, not from there.
Yes.
Where, for example, here in the United States, people see us as like the stereotypical Hispanics, primarily stereotypical from like Mexico, stuff like that, countries in that region. But if you were to travel to those areas and you meet up with family, they would tell you that you may seem too white, too Americanized, that you don't follow the cultures as much as they do. So you are put in a position where you really don't know where you belong. Like, do you really belong with your culture, or do you now associate with the assimilated form of living in the United States, I guess? And she brought up that idea because most of us are being affected by it. And it wasn't just here at the UIS campus. You could see on the faces of those participants at USHLI that everyone has felt it or experienced it at some point, and it has made them question who they are. And it's kind of tested them to see whether or not they can really break this cycle of oppression that's being forced into themselves.
Yeah.
So I think for the next slide, we were talking about the privilege circle and our experience. So in effect, when we were trying to do this presentation, we were trying to make it interactive with the audience if we were to do a face-to-face. And the entire point of the interaction was that we actually performed like a privilege circle with individuals that were present at this presentation. Now, given the circumstances that we're in, we want to still extend that invitation to the individuals who are watching us, who are listening to us, and really resonate with what we're going to be doing. I know it's going to be difficult because the whole point of the interaction was to have everyone not only experience it for themselves, but also experience it, what it means for other individuals around each other. But please, if you are going to participate in this, slightly nod your head or raise your hand wherever you are, and acknowledge the fact that if you do resonate with whatever statement we make, or you do have an experience with it, to just understand the fact that like that's not only an experience that you're sharing, it's most like an experience that we're all sharing, or we all felt, or we all have been left out of. And so that was really the whole point of the privilege circle. So before I actually start doing the examples, do any of you two want to add into what I said before I give the examples?
Yeah, just if anybody is not clear on what a privilege circle is, similar to like what a privilege walk is, where questions are listed that like you either resonate with or you don't, and it's either you take a step back, you take a step forward, or you take a step back. This activity was done in a circle, and Ayala emphasized like the idea of like circles are often the symbol of unity and togetherness. So it was really interesting being in a circle and then moving up and seeing those around you, then you move back and those around you. But Lizette with the questions, or Diego, anything to add?
No, I'm all good. You guys have about said everything I needed.
Okay. So if you've ever been called names because of your race, class, ethnicity, gender, or sexual orientation, take one step back or nod your head. If you studied the culture of your ancestors in elementary school, take one step forward. And just before, as Grace mentioned, when you take a step back, it's almost like, how would you guys describe that? Like missing out or not having that experience with detriments your ability to move on in life, move on into the future.
Yeah.
It
Versus
definitely makes, I'm sorry, but it definitely makes your life a little bit harder to achieve the goals that you have compared to someone who has already taken steps forwards or agrees or resonated with these questions that have already been asked.
Mm-hmm.
right, and when you take a step forward, it almost means like you had the privilege of being able to live through that experience that or have the ability to use that for your own advantage.
Mm-hmm.
If you've ever had to skip a meal or were hungry because there was not enough money to buy food when you were growing up, take one step back. If you've ever owned a car, take one step forward. If you were paid less, treated less fairly because of race, ethnicity, gender, or sexual orientation, take one step back. If you were ever offered a good job because of your association with a friend or family member, take one step forward. And the last one that I kind of want to emphasize here is if your ancestors were forced to come to the USA, not by choice, take one step back. And these were just kind of examples that we wanted to share with the audience. Obviously, we had a bigger list, but because this is more of a presentation that you're going to be listening to, we wanted to share not only the examples, but our own experiences, because AYALA had different statements, but very much similar to the ones we're sharing. But one of the ones that resonated with me was the one where she said, if you have anyone in your family members that could be affected by deportation or is an immigrant, like take two steps back, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
And my personal take on that statement was surprising because, you know, a lot of the students did take two steps back, but some of them didn't. And to me, that was like, how do you live without worrying about this consistently throughout your daily life, throughout your, you know, any time that you're away from your family? That's just something that just stays with you. So that to me was my personal take on that statement, along with other statements. But you guys, what do you guys think?
Diego, did you want to?
Okay, yeah, kind of the similar playing field as like Lisa. When I first heard that question, I expected almost everyone to go back just from where I grew up. There were a lot of undocumented people, close friends, relatives that had, you know, scary experiences, people who were afraid of getting deported by ICE. And so I expected most people to step back, but I saw a few people who didn't move at all or step forward or whatever the case was with that question. And in a way, it made me angry because I've lived with that fear my entire life. I've known so many people who I'd be terrified to lose from deportation. And so it angered me because how do you not live with that fear? How is it that you're able to go on with your daily life, not having to worry about so-and-so, about getting deported, about being separated from those that you love? It just didn't seem fair to me. And by the end of the whole privilege circle activity, I was pretty upset because we weren't all the same, and that's going to be a given no matter what. But I didn't expect some of the people within that workshop to be so far up ahead compared to everyone else. We all have different experiences and all, but it just seemed very unfair that some people had more of a privilege, had better access to certain things than some of us did, and it's obviously going to give them a better advantage to helping them succeed in life, while leaving all of us here back in the dust.
And that was something that like Ayala like wanted us to recognize during the privilege circle, and to broaden it out and to really highlight what Diego was talking about, the fact that like, yeah, there were Latinos that were more inner of the circle, and there was some, I know in my group, like they couldn't even take more steps back because they were as far back as possible. And like Diego had mentioned, like I personally was more inner of the circle, and she asked us to like the more inner circle group, like look around, turn around, and see those behind you. How does that make you feel? And one person towards the inner, he was like, I feel shitty, like I feel like I shouldn't be here. But one of the students, or the students in the further back, was like, don't feel shitty, like don't feel bad. Oh, excuse my language. Just like feel like it was, she made it seem like that it was better for us to like use the position that we're at and use our privilege in order to help those behind us and those that need it. And so like, though there are those stark differences between our communities, there can be ways to utilize those differences in order to build a stronger community and to help build others. And I think the one of the main purposes of the huelga was to recognize that.
Yeah. I would say, just to continue with what you're saying, Grace, I definitely remember the position that I was in. And, you know, the funny thing is that I don't think many of us are physically aware. And I'm saying physically because I think mentally we all know where we're at, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Think about it and say, like, that's where I am and I know that. But physically, to be able to see that, wow, like I'm so back than where I thought I was. Or be so upfront where I didn't even recognize this. Small things like that. But I also remember her asking the inner circle the question of how you feel. And the one that really struck me was the individual who said, I feel guilty, I feel ashamed. And a lot of the ones in the back were saying, I feel angry, I feel jealous, like, I don't think this is fair, it's unjust. And that just kind of like made me understand we are all human beings, you know, like those are that we don't want to have, but we do. And when we were told, like, how do you get everyone to be in the same place as you are? Some people from the inner circle said, well, we can take a step back. And then immediately, almost like hyping each other up, we were like, no, like, you can't take a step back, like, share a hand, like, lend a hand,
pull someone forward, yeah.
forward, like, don't take a step back and be where we are, because that's not the point. Like, we
Right.
want to be where you're at. So I think that having like us as students figure that out without having someone be told, like, you need to help this individual out, even if it's a stranger, like, we as a collective group, we decided, like, no, we don't want you guys to be in our position, we want to be in your position, so turn around.
Or
and
not
help
even just that. It also was, or at least from what I saw, it was more like, we don't want you guys back here with us. We want you to succeed. We've never met any of these students. We don't know their stories. I have no idea of who they are. But the fact that like everyone in the back, the outer circle said that, like, no, we want you to succeed. And if or when you can, bring that success back to us and help us to move up there with you.
Right.
And that.
Go ahead.
No, keep going.
Finish your thought. Go ahead.
No, it was very heartwarming, and it felt very wholesome to think that, like, strangers, but we're all still connected because we are one big race and we're all in it together. And even though we don't know each other, it's good to know that those who are out there in the inner circle are willing to be able to help us at some point in the future, or even right now.
Yeah, and Ayala definitely in our session, she touched upon that the Latino culture in general is a culture that embraces and is so friendly, and that family and that familiarity, even though we might be strangers, and that willingness to help is going to be there because that's just how the Latino culture is. So, yeah, period to that.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that not only for us, but truly, I feel like if we had been able to like share this experience with our audience
Mm-hmm.
face to face, it would have resonated in a different way, because we've known all of each, like we were with strangers at USHLI, right? And we felt this way with just strangers. Can you like just imagine for 2 seconds what it would be like if we saw our friends, our closest companions, our partners in classes, just standing where they are and just imagining where their position would be, where your position would be, you as audience, like where you would be along with your peers. It's just a different experience completely, because it overflows with emotion. You're drawn back as to, damn, this is really where I'm standing, or this is really where I'm at. And the experience that if we can, we'd be able to share with everyone is just impactful and amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the cycle of decolonizing, this was like one of the last tidbits, like the last slide that she had talked to us about. I think it was right shortly after we did the privilege circle, which is how do we create change? And even on the list that's on the PowerPoint, she she mentioned self-love, school, unlearn, relearn, educate. The idea of, like Lisa, the question that you asked, like did you learn about your ancestors in elementary school? Like I really didn't. And the learning that I was doing about my culture was outside of the classroom. So how do we help, influence that our identities are being in classrooms or being in the curriculum? And as a future educator, like I know that's something that I'm going to want to prioritize in my classroom to, like, one, decolonize myself, but help decolonize my students of color. So definitely that was one point that she had talked about that resonated with me. And the government, so how, like, and even in this year at UIS, how we as an organization, as OLAS, has been practicing activism and even decolonizing, like how have we done that? And I'll let the rest of my viewers speak on that.
Yeah, no, I mean, as OLAS primarily, right, because we are a group here, we've done a lot in terms of trying to really get our students aware of where they're coming from. A lot of times, many of them are coming from very limited amount of students that have people of color within their schools, like predominantly white. For example, myself, I went to predominantly white high school, and so there wasn't really a time or a chance for you to really get involved with who you are as a Latino member.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until actually like when I got to the university level that I was aware that, oh, this is my culture, this is who I am. It's not just speaking Spanish, but it's also embracing our flag, embracing our music, our food. And OLAS really tries to do that, not just by doing like the HLHM events, but also just throwing events in there that really just bring the wholesomeness of being a Latino and what it means to be in a school that doesn't have many, but the ones that we do have, we embrace it wholeheartedly,
For me, I've mentioned this before to a lot of my peers and friends. I've had the exact opposite experience to what Lisa has had. I went to a predominantly Hispanic high school. My area, my community, my neighborhood is primarily made up of Hispanics. There are people coming in from different countries of Central and Southern America. And so to me, I've never really had an experience where I didn't feel oppressed or didn't feel like I couldn't express who I am.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a point where we've all realized that we've all come from the same place, that there really isn't a need to celebrate because we all already collectively feel like that. But it wasn't until I got to the college, to here at UAS, that I realized how much it meant to me. There's a saying that I forgot exactly how it goes, but it's along the lines of, you never know what you have until you lose it, right? And so I never knew how much everything of my culture, my family, my friends, how much that meant to me until I lost it, until I went to an area that was predominantly white.
Right.
And so first I had to practice self-love, which is, as Jessica AYALA mentioned in her presentation, is the first step to decolonizing, to be able to really accept who I am and be proud of where I come from, be proud of the practices that we do, the music that we listen to, and then find a way to integrate that on campus. And with OLAS, besides from having formal events, we just help to create an environment where students are able to speak the language they were born speaking with. So no longer have to adjust to whether or not a person will be able to understand you. You'll be able to speak a language, or you can speak both. You can do Spanglish if you want. And it just helps to create closer bonds with people of color on campus and help being you to really express who you are and not be ashamed of it.
And in that slideshow, the create community portion at the bottom, like that's ultimately what we're trying to do, excuse me, when we decolonize. And I think Olas has done a great job at creating that community, at creating that comfortability for students to feel like they can speak their native tongue, that they can share their music without feeling embarrassed, or they can just be themselves unapologetically in their culture. So way to go, Olas.
No, but yeah, I would definitely agree with what all of you guys are saying. And truly, the whole point not only of our presentation but of Ayala's presentation was a call to action in a sort of way. And the great thing about this, I guess if you want to see it in the positive sense, is that she really didn't leave us with a blueprint, right? She didn't give us like a list that we could formally use and systematically go through to change our environment or make an impact in our communities. She kind of just let it be like a blank page and said, here you go, here's this knowledge, here's this education, what are you going to do about it now? And so a call to action from her was really what we got, and we immediately wanted to start working with it. You know, we wanted to make sure that we could emphasize the privilege circle, emphasize the need in embracing our community, embracing our culture, and the changes that we were going to make to our events, but again, with the given circumstances. But we are trying to do that with other methods. For those of you who don't know, here's my little tidbit. Follow us Al Momento con Olas. We're on Spotify, Google, a ton of other stuff. So if you have questions, go ahead and ask me. But we really are trying to connect as many individuals, not just from UIS, but from other areas, to understand that even though we're a small group, we're a very powerful group.
Yeah. And with that call to action from Ayala and from us at Olas, I think the podcast is one of the ways that we're really maintaining that students can really tune in and relate and even ponder and ask questions about our organization and what we stand for. And I think Ayala's workshop in general just gave me a sense of like, okay, I'm already very prideful in my identity, but the parts that I do struggle with, and that aspect of decolonizing like really stuck to my mind, because there are still aspects that I find myself slipping in and being like, oh, hold on, let me not give in to these thoughts and to these status quo. So I think it was a good refresher, and also a good way for us to in the future build events like building allies and how we can help others kind of decolonize their minds on campus.
Yeah, for sure. For me, at least, it kind of reinforced the sense of community that we all have, especially with people who we don't know. It was a very powerful moment for me because with complete strangers, I still felt connected to them. I still felt like they were true allies, even though I've never met them, because we've all had different circumstances, but we've all agreed collectively that we're going to be there for each other no matter what. And to bring that to Olas, as we've mentioned before, I think we've done a good job building a good sense of community here. But I think for me, it's helped to be more aware of people's different circumstances, and hopefully that's going to help me in the future, or at least the future e-board, to be more aware of individuals in our Olas community, whether or not they're feeling comfortable, how do they feel transitioning from high school to college, or any current issues they're dealing with, and how do we go from there to make sure that they have the tools necessary to be successful, and how do we provide a stronger community to keep it growing from here.
Yeah. And then also just for references also, we do have an episode that we're going to probably air soon that has the full coverage of what USHLI was to each and on all of us. Not this presentation really doesn't even tip the iceberg of what USHLI meant to us, what we learned from it. So we're working on putting that episode up soon, but please stay in tune with that, because that has way more content. And I wish we could share this with everyone in this presentation, but because of how we want to really emphasize just this particular portion of USHLI, I would definitely say to stick around and listen to that soon.
Yeah, and with that, we'll let you move on to that podcast, and we hope you've enjoyed our presentation. And stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you.